research first. Do your research. Do not jump into something without a deep dive into something that you have interest in. Now, a lot of times these interests come from things that happen to you, and that's great. But before you go diving into things, like a perfect example, I was competing with virtual private networks. So virtual private was a much better play because they were making money, right? They could sell this virtual, and I was free. And I was stuck in this browser world, which was free, and couldn't figure out how to make any money. So as I say, do your research before you do anything.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that has built several businesses or startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. And if you ever need help with patents and trademarks, just go to strategymeeting.com and grab some time with us to talk about them. Now, today on the podcast, we have another great guest, Jeff, and I'm probably going to mess up his last name, Bermant. Is that close?
Bermant. It's close
Bermant.
enough.
All right, I was kind of close.
Yeah.
But Jeff is a quick introduction. So he started, or he was a tennis player, or got a tennis scholarship, I think, to USC, and even went on the pro circuit for a short period of time. And then after going on the pro circuit for a bit, he went to teaching tennis for a period of time, and then decided, hey, I've had enough with tennis. I'm not going to probably make that as a whole life of it, and went into the real estate industry for quite a bit of time, and did that and built it up, and then decided, okay, I've had enough with the real estate industry. Now I'm going over the tech industry. And so I moved over the tech industry, weaved his way through it a bit, and that's where he brings us to what he's doing today that we'll chat a bit more about in the podcast. So as that much as an introduction, welcome onto the podcast, Jeff.
Thanks, Devin. I want to clear something up. At USC, I was the greatest bench sitter of all time.
Hey, if they'll give you a scholarship to fence sit, I want that scholarship. So I take it as I'll take it wherever you can get it.
It was pretty funny. You go there at USC and you're going to, one of the best schools for, universities for tennis teams. And you end up, you're nationally ranked, and you end up sitting on the bench the whole time. I really considered transferring, but I love Southern California so much. It was like, I'm one of the 33 million that came from back east and sat himself down, and it was like, no, I'm not going anywhere. And here I am some years later, still here. And yeah, the rest of California is still asking me to go home, but go back to New York, wherever you came from, you're just a pain. But
hey,
I'm happy to be here.
That's
happy
right.
to see you again, and happy to be on your show. So thanks.
Well, thank you. We're excited to have you on. So with that correction, you still got a tennis scholarship, right? So I was technically correct.
Yeah.
So you played tennis for a period of time, or at least fenced it, but was on a scholarship to USC. But maybe walk us through. So you're coming up, you're finishing up schooling, and you went to a pro circuit for a little bit, right?
Did a year of the pro circuit. And I probably made about $17,000, but really most of my money was made selling tennis rackets as I was going along, or whatever I could barter. So when I went for my first job interview at Coldwell Banker, which was a big real estate company at the time, the brokerage company, they said, well, what kind of sales experience did you have? And I said, well, not really anything, but for a year, I just had to figure out how I was going to make a living with not making much money on the tennis circuit. And I was buying and selling things. And I said, well, we're kind of interested in you then. So I'm not sure it was just for my sales skill, but I got to work for one of the best at the time, one of the best companies, and even there, I actually came up with some innovative ideas for the company, and I'm kind of proud. I launched some things as a guy who just walked in the door, came up with a great idea for Coldwell Banker, and then of course I went into sales and I worked for Tom Selleck's dad, Bob Selleck, which was a really great experience, and I learned a lot from him. And then decided I wanted to be a real estate developer, which is a fairly natural thing from people who want to be in the real estate business, to become developers and operators of office buildings and other things. It did that for 25 or 30 years. And then, as you mentioned, I decided I was very much annoyed. I'm one of these self-do-it guys where I'll go do it myself. And I was very annoyed at the internet where I was getting these emails from people I didn't know. They were, asking me silly questions. I was getting viruses, malware, and I thought, well, maybe I should jump in and see if I could do something better. And that kind of led to a full career the last 10 years of working in the tech industry. And I finally learned somewhat the acronyms, which I
Mm,
never could figure out, but now I understand a few of them. And
mm,
here I am. And I think I'm being blessed into a great space, something new and innovative. And I came out of a really, I guess I was somewhat before my time in the privacy mode.
mm. So no, and I think that's an interesting journey. So maybe hitting on a couple things. So you mentioned diving back just a bit into your story. So you're doing tennis. You had to figure out how to do sale. To support yourself as you were pursuing the tennis career, and then you got into real estate. So how was that transition from going from kind of athletics and competing to real estate? Was it different jungle, same kind of game where hey, it's still a competitive marketplace, and you're going to real estate, or was it a different transition, or how did you kind of manage to go from tennis to real estate, and how was that transition for you?
So the thing you should know is my feet hurt. When I got into shoes, because I never wore shoes before, I wore tennis shoes all the time, right? All I
Mm,
did was play tennis and go to classes. Um, so that was the first thing I recognized was, oh, this hurts, because wearing shoes I was not used to, and
mm,
so that was one of the experiences. But it's interesting. You bring your skill set, which is tenaciousness, creative, because you got to be creative on a tennis court. You got to
mm,
figure out what his strengths and weaknesses are, and you got to do that quickly. You have to stay at it. It's a tenacious thing. So it was relatively the same. I think the biggest problem I had was asking for orders. I
mm,
could sell you something, but then you have to finish up with going, hey, well, do you want to sign a listing with me, or can we get that lease signed? That was a kind of a hard transaction because
mm,
in the athletic world, you don't ask for the order. So
mm,
that's the thing that I can give you a quick story. So when I went to work for Coldwell Banker, and I finally I had a training session for a year at the main office, and then I worked for Bob Selleck, and I was so proud of myself because I had just gotten my first listing, and Bob said, he says, "Oh, you got the listing?" And I said, "Yes," and I got a 5% commission, and he said, "No, you're supposed to get a 6% of the first sum of money, and then 5% thereafter. Didn't you get that?" I said, "No." Did he said you asked for it? And I said, "No, I just didn't. It's another $2,500. It wasn't a big deal." He made me on a Friday go
mm.
down to, it was like 2 hours away, El Segundo, in the middle of a traffic day, go knock on this guy's door and kind of apologize and say, I didn't ask you for the full amount. And the guy said, God, all you had to do is ask me for it. I would have given it to you.
All you have to do is ask, but if you never ask, you're never going to get it. So that is a funny story. But and it kind of, and I like the kind of you're saying there is, I think, transferable skill sets across a lot of different types of industries. And too often we kind of tell ourselves, oh, I've been doing this for X amount of time, and this is all I know. And so you never really let yourself say, but how can I reuse these same skills that are equally applicable in other industries? So I like how taking it minus the ability to, or learning how to close and how to ask for the full amount and kind of or stealing the deal, at least the tenacity and going out and getting the deals and figuring that out was interesting. So now we'll keep going to the story you already told. So you did real estate for a period of time, and then you said, okay, I hate technology, or technology doesn't work how I think it should. So how is that again, that transition from going from what would be real estate over to a tech industry and making that pivot?
So it's actually been much harder than going from being an athlete to real estate. This is a much harder transition, and it's difficult. In the senses, it's difficult. I'll tell you what's in common, and I'll tell you what's different. So
Mm,
all the acronyms are different. All
mm,
the speak is different. I don't know how to code anything.
mm,
So you're kind of living in a world where you don't understand a lot. And I
mm,
would say the first 3 or 4 years when I was in the business, I clearly didn't understand a lot of stuff. I mean, today's a lot different, but back then I certainly was at a loss. I mean, I could barely turn on my computer. My son had to come over and go, "Here, Dad, let me push the button for you." And I was like,
mm,
"What?" So that was a struggle. and I made a lot of mistakes,
Mm,
which, if you can recover from your mistakes, you're good. You need to admit where you make mistakes. And I'm readily able to do that and say, okay, well, just don't make that same mistake twice. That's
mm.
kind of my rule of thumb. You make it one time and hopefully you don't make it again. But it
No,
is
I
harder, a lot harder.
no, and and it's interesting the difference. So some skills are more easily transferable, and some take more work to come up to speed on. Because I think it's interesting that dichotomy of, hey, I went from tennis to real estate, and that was a other than or figuring out to ask for the money and the final close, it was a much more easy one to jump into. And yet when you go to the technology, it's a different skill set, and you had to say, hey, some of these are transferable and some of these aren't, and that dichotomy. But nonetheless, you made the jump now to the tech industry, and I think you did that when we talked a little bit before the podcast about 11 years ago or so. Is that right?
That's about right. So I have the longest startup ever existed, probably. I hate to
Hey.
admit that, but that's true. But that's part of the tenacity. Now,
Mm,
my skill set was sales.
mm,
So I knew how to sell something. And honestly, I won't
mm,
sell you something I don't believe in. I'm not
mm,
I'm not that kind of salesman. And that's
mm,
what was hard for me at the beginning, was to try and sell something that I didn't believe in, and I could never do that.
mm,
That was one. And the other thing I brought to the table was financial skills.
mm,
So I understood how to do an Excel. I can't do Excel, but I understand totally. I understand very complicated computations in real estate, like IRR returns, all types of very fancy types of things. I understand mortgages and a lot of the technology in real estate I understood. I could
mm,
bring that to the market, but what I couldn't anticipate, which is where you kind of fall down, was I hadn't really made a plan of how I was going to make money. I came up with this great idea of how I was going to make a great browser better than anybody else made, but I
mm,
had forgotten probably the most important ingredient was, well, wait, how are we going to sustain ourselves? And I had to keep moving around, pivoting, 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 pivoting. I finally, after 7 or 8 years, I was about to throw in the towel because there really, you build a browser, there really isn't a way. I think maybe Brave has figured it out. But
mm,
on the most part, you don't make money off of your browsers. You make money other ways, but your browser is not one of them. And it
mm,
took me a long time to figure out that my browser, the way I had designed it, was not going to make me any money. And
mm,
you get, as much as you'd love to like say, well, I just love what I built. It's really hard then to give it to the world and not have something to keep it up and running.
mm,
You need some money to, otherwise, it was just a great idea. And nobody would back you. The investors didn't like the space I was in. They didn't like you going up against Google, which is Chrome, or going up against any of those guys. And they all remembered, 7 or 8 years ago, they still remember the internet wars, I should say, the browser wars.
mm.
And that soured a lot of investors like, well, I like your idea, but I don't want anything to do with you.
And that is a hard one. But I think it's a good one to learn from is, you can have a really great product, but if you don't have a path, you also have to have a path to monetize it. Otherwise, it's always just a passion project or something that you do as a hobby, but you're not going to be able to support yourself off of it and vice versa. So I think that that's, a good cardinal rule to learn. So as you made that realization, just saying, okay, I can make the world's best browser, but, and probably my guess is it'd be hard because Chrome comes for free, or at least, for free in the sense you don't have to pay for it. Same thing with Internet Explorer and all the other ones. And so it's going to be hard for people to say, I'll pay for a browser when I'm used to getting it for free. And so, as you kind of come to that realization, how did you pivot or adjust, or what did you do to say, okay, we have to make money, we have to support ourselves. What are we going to do to make this profitable? Kind of how did you make that transition or pivot?
Yeah, so that was the lights on aha. And I would tell anybody who's an entrepreneur that if you're even about to give up, if you have an idea, try and work through it. And sorry, one of the phones are ringing, but just ignore it. Try and work through that idea before you throw in the towel. And that was, I'll tell you, that's exactly where I was. I still have a
Mm,
wife at home telling me you should quit when I know we're very close to a very successful idea. So what happened was, I had the browser in place, and I was to the point of shutting it down and saying, I just can't figure out. And here's the thing: all of and I want entrepreneurs to know this. You cannot take whatever your consultants or your employees are telling you
Mm,
you really should not listen to them,
mm,
because they have their own self-interest.
mm,
And so if they say, well, just do this for a little bit more time or do that, that doesn't make it going to be a success. It could very well make it that they're just going to get paid. And so you have to be very careful about third parties telling you how you're going to make money without you doing the research yourself and saying, aha, that makes sense. And maybe I can do that. Because for years, people told me that Cocoon browser, don't worry, let's do this, let's do that. None of those things worked. And, literally spent millions of dollars really learning a lesson. Well, luckily I can afford it, but
mm,
learning a lesson. So when it came to Cocoon, I was just about to shut down, and I said to my son, I was talking to him, telling, I think I need to shut this down. It's not making any sense. And he said, well, Dad, have you ever thought about people's data itself? And I was
mm,
going like, no, what are you driving at? He said, well, that's valuable, and nobody's getting paid for it. Why don't
mm,
you, if you know how to build a browser, why don't you build a browser that allows people to get paid? And I was like, oh my God, what a sensational idea. And of course, I jumped on it and got into the research. And then there's lots of pitfalls in it, by the way. There's nothing that's perfect in these things. And
mm,
so there's still pitfalls in it. But the idea and the concept, which seemingly is working, is allow people to become more of a democracy over your internet, and allow the people to profit off of their own work.
mm,
So what's happening right now is all the big companies, Google, Twitter, Chrome, all these companies, oh, Chrome's part of Google, they're kind of fooling you. They're saying you get to use our browser for free, but we're collecting billions of dollars between
mm,
search and your browser, and data that's collected on you. You ever see your Google thing say, oh, it's 15 minutes to work, or they're collecting that data as well. And so
mm,
that data is being sold or used to get advertisers to advertise to you. So what's really happening is the user, are the product,
mm.
right? And I realized that, well, that doesn't seem fair to me. What seems fair to me is the user should get part of the profit. Could I make that work? And so my math skills, of course, then I sat down and went, well, wait, I think I could make that
Hmm.
work. And so that became my next passion, which is, it's kind of odd. You go from privacy, which I'm a huge fan of, to something that says, I don't know if there's that much privacy left in the world anyway. Why don't we sell our data and get paid for
Hmm.
it? Right? It's a real dichotomy be going from privacy to, well, let's get paid. If because you have to realize there really isn't a lot of privacy left.
Hmm.
And no matter what the government does, companies are going to find their way around those things, and the reason why that's never going to go away is because the internet is built on free. But
Hmm.
free is not free. Free is somebody's taking that data and monetizing it. So the minute the government says you can't do that anymore, the minute I would say you're paying for everything on the internet.
No, and I think I think that's a fair point. It's kind of what goes back to the old saying or adage or wherever it comes from, and I don't remember it is. If you don't know who's paying for it, you're the product type of a thing, right? In the
Yeah.
sense that so I think that I think it's an interesting that you have that kind of aha moment of, hey, we're already we're getting monitored, so to speak, your privacy is going by the wayside. And as a side note, it's interesting how quickly that happened in the sense, right? For a long time, people cherish their privacy, and then it comes out, hey, if you'll give me a free browser, if you'll give me a free subscription, people are more than willing to give up some of that data and that privacy. But hey, you're saying if that's already the place that people have decided they want to go and that what they're willing to accept, then let's at least see how we can make that so you receiving compensation for giving up that data. So I think
Yeah.
that certainly makes sense.
What was sad to me, I've always been a small business owner, and even in my real estate career, where we did really well. But I've always believed, that I'll say the guy who, not the big corporations, and I never want my company to act like this. I know investors will hammer me, but I have a real defense, which is, if my customers don't profit, we don't profit, which makes this a much easier thing to really have a great company, because it's not you versus, your user, it's you maybe versus selling data or something of that nature. But what I realized was, we've all been sort of taken. we didn't really realize, I would tell you, most people until 10 years ago didn't realize that they were
Mm,
trading their privacy in
mm,
for the free internet. They were the
mm,
product and they were never told that. No one ever, that was kind of well, this is like, it reminds me of the drug thing that went on in cycling.
mm.
No one knew this was going on for years and years. There was suspicion, there was all these, maybes, until Lance finally admitted it. I mean, Lance
Mm.
Armstrong admitted that, yeah, he was doing drugs. And it's the same thing with the internet, in my opinion. None of these people really wanted to admit that they were giving you something free, which wasn't free,
Mm.
and taking all that data and using it, and you didn't realize it. A lot of people still don't realize that that's what's going on. They have no
Yeah,
idea.
no, and it'd be interesting because I tend to agree in the sense that even people that think, okay, social media platforms, Facebook or whichever one you want to choose, they probably don't realize how much unless you were to become a marketing and advertising, go the back end and be on the business side, how much data they collect and how targeted they can get the ads and how they can actually put that as a platform. So the ads that are popping up to you aren't popping up to everyone; they're popping up to a specific subset that's being targeted. So I certainly, agree with you, and it's interesting how that is adjusted and how that's shifted over time. Well, as we, so now you've come to the conclusion that hey, this is where we're going to pivot, this is where we're going to make a profit, and we're going to make we're going to take the company. So now, where's the next 5 to 10 years take you, or not 5 to 10 years, 6 to 12 months? Kind of where do you see how do you continue to pivot, evolve, and bring that to the marketplace?
So we started this. This is kind of a great story. We started down the line of the desktop, and we're
Hmm.
still being guided by consultants telling us this and that. And it turns out that what we thought we were going to get paid, they didn't pay us for our customers. And this is not about me. I don't get paid unless my customers get well paid. And so we've had this problem on desktop where, honestly, I want to be honest with people.
Hmm.
You couldn't make a lot of money on it. I think that dynamic will change as we grow, and as if this works and people say, sure, I'll accept a couple bucks to start, and hopefully in a year it will double or triple.
Hmm.
Um, and you'll find that all the companies are in the space. I think I'm unique in one way, and I'll explain that in a minute, versus some of the competition. Um, so that's the one problem that you really have. But
Hmm.
if you have multiple buyers soon enough, or you find the right formula, I think we can pay people enough money to get them interested and to grow it. And the more we grow it,
Hmm.
the more money we end up making for you. Because the more buyers that want to buy that data, they don't really care who you are.
Hmm.
They're not even interested in you. They're more interested in your profile, so to speak.
Hmm.
They care about your name and address. In fact, a lot of times your email addresses are hashed, meaning
Hmm.
that the if they sell your email, they don't sell just the open. They hash it so somebody has to go figure it out and match it up. Now I
Hmm.
can tell you a computer can probably do that, but they don't outrightly sell those. And some companies, I guess, do, but we don't.
Hmm.
And so the idea here is to the next 6 to 12 months is to build the base. We're going to focus in on people who are commuters, truck drivers, and Uber drivers and
Hmm.
Lyft, because the miles, it turns out that the miles they drive are very valuable.
Hmm.
And like a truck driver could be making in the first year $15 to $25 a month.
Hmm.
And that could grow substantially if he throws in his browsing time. Um, and hopefully we'll have some other things. You want to sell a profile, you can. Um, so will turn into, in my prediction, 2 to 3 years, could turn into a 40 or $50 a month opportunity for people to make some money off of their own data.
Hmm.
And that's where I see the vision. The vision is the democracy of you deciding what you want to do with your data. That's the
Hmm.
first thing that you get to do. If you want to just give it away first of all, if you want to make it really private, go buy yourself a VPN. That's the
Hmm.
only real solution virtual private network. It's a real solution I can think of, and have it on your phone, have it on all your devices so it hides your IP address all the
Hmm.
time. On your phone, that's a little different problem because they have your ID on your phone and they can track you on your phone. Do you have all those apps? By the way, I hate to tell people, but half those apps you have on your phone, you know
Mm,
why they're free? They're taking your data and they're sending it somewhere.
mm,
Shazam's a perfect example of a company that's free, and that data is getting sent and being sold to someone.
mm.
So really, there is no privacy left. I hate to give bad news to people, but it's the truth.
No, and I think that they're, facing reality and understanding it, at least then you're able to say, am I wanting to sell this? And if I'm going to sell this, or if I'm going to be the product, let's make, as you said, some compensation for it.
You can,
Oh,
yeah, you can ignore the whole thing if you want and just pretend you have all the privacy in the world because you don't know any better, but you'll see those ads that are attributable to the things you're looking at. So as long as you want to ignore all that, you can be an oblivious and you can do it.
well, so as and there are plenty of things that we can continue and lots of good rabbit holes and tangents. But as we start to wrap up the podcast and get towards the end of it, I always ask two questions. So why don't we jump to those now? So the first question I always ask is: along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what did you learn from it?
Hmm. Well, I've had a lot of bad experiences in the business. And I would say on the most part, just in general,
Hmm.
listening to consultants because they don't necessarily have your best in mind.
Hmm.
And so you've got to be very careful about consultants who you hire that tell you a great story and then don't deliver or it doesn't just work out.
Hmm. No, I think that makes sense, and
That's a
I
real
do.
pitfall.
No, and I think that too often you hire, I'll hire a consultant, it will solve all of my problems, and yet the consultants are there to make money, they are there to get an income, and sometimes while that what they propose may not always be in your best interest, or they may not know your business or those things well enough. So I think that that's certainly some good wisdom. Second question I always ask is: so if you're talking to someone that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Research first. Do your research. Do not jump into something without a deep dive into something that you have interest in. Now, a lot of times these interests come from things that happen to you, and that's great. But before you go diving into things like a perfect example, I was competing with virtual private networks. So
Mm,
virtual private was a much better play because they were making money, right? They
mm.
could sell this virtual, and I was free. And I was stuck in this browser world, which was free, and couldn't figure out how to make any money. So as I say, do your research before you do anything.
No, I think that's great advice in the sense of, too often you have an exciting idea or something that you think will work out well. You don't fully understand the marketplace or all the ins and outs or how you're going to make money or monetize it or how you're going to take it to market or how you're going to compete with people. And so you just get excited with the idea, and yet doing the research can one either better prepare you to dive into the business or avoid the pitfalls of not diving into a business that you're not going to be able to compete or be successful in. So I think that's both great pieces of advice. Well, as people want to reach out to you, they want to be a user, they want to be a customer of your product, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above. What's the best way to connect up with you or find out more?
So if you want to be an investor, contact me directly. That's the best thing to do. And I'm
Hmm.
Jeff. My email is Jeff at the like in Victor World, WORLDC.com. We do have a crowdfunding page. So if you want to put in $100 just to give it a whirl, you could.
Hmm.
I'm not allowed to recommend or not recommend in a sense, but I can tell you, you have a very tenacious, hardworking, honest a guy. I think this is just going to be a great um, field for us. And then the second thing is if you want to try the product, unfortunately, we don't have iOS yet. We
Hmm.
have Android. So you can go to the Android store or you could go to our website, which is trycocoon.com.
Hmm.
And you'll see the product that's for sale. I mean, the product that will make you money. Download that on your Android at the Play Store and go after it. And you'll see it's not going to make you a ton of money to start, but stay with
Hmm.
us and we'll eventually figure that all out. And our goal is to make you a lot of money. And the third way is you can download our desktop, which is both for iOS or for Mac and Windows. So you have your choice of a desktop or the Android.
All right. Well, I definitely encourage, whether you're an investor or wanting to try out the product and you have an Android phone or any or all of the above, to reach out, find out more about Jeff and his product and all that he has going on, and definitely or something that's exciting to watch as it continues to evolve. Well, Jeff, thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you listeners that are wanting to come on and tell your journey and share your story, feel free to apply to be on the podcast by going to inventivejourneyguest.com. If you're a listener, make sure to click subscribe so you get notifications as all the new episodes come out. And last but not least, if you ever need help with patents or trademarks, feel free to reach out to us at Miller IP Law by going to strategymeeting.com, and we're always here to help. Thank you again, Jeff. It's been a pleasure and fun to have you on, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you very much, Devin. I enjoyed being here with you.
All right.